the films after that they came after, even films like, for example, The Quest, where it had some of the tropes of Bloodsport and the Bloodsport sequels, they didn't work. Why? Always sounds like an anime waiting to happen. Viking Samurai versus the Beast. I mean, it's just, Beast from the East. You're kind of like the big crown and glory of my day. My son Sean played Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. And then there's a famous local actress, Michelle Yim. My shit had her 55th year anniversary event party.
Oh,
And then I headed back home with my producing partner, Andrew, who you just said
yes.
hi to. And now I top off an exciting Saturday in Hong Kong with Viking Samurai.
Yeah, what
So
a
it's
night, man.
great.
What a great life you have there, man.
Yeah, I do.
Exciting
I have to say,
exciting full
I do
night.
appreciate it. Yeah.
But yeah, so last time we spoke, of course, we were addressing Michael Biehn, and then
Yes,
what ended up happening is you went to his podcast. Now you guys are cool again.
it was amazing. And what was funny about it was, if you remember, when I was giving my side of the story, so to speak, thinking almost, this will never go anywhere other than I'll, for once, vent and get it off my own chest. I was never Michael Bean's fucking gopher. Down in the comments, it was like, I'm Michael Biehn, I'm Michael Biehn. And I'm like hell you are. And guess what? I
It
think
was
did you
Michael
you
Biehn.
called him, right?
Yeah, I was
You
like,
got
no,
this.
that's
He said,
him.
and you
Trust me.
called him and you said, "Are you really Michael Biehn?" And you gave him some test questions. It says, "Okay, so did you or did you not have a mustache in the abyss and whatever?" But no, and then he got me on his show, which I was enormously grateful because if you look at the caliber of people, I mean, I think four after me was James Cameron. It's like, so I felt he was very kind and generous, and it was lovely because people were in the comments, I've got no idea who this guy is, but he seems charming and funny, which was great. And then yeah, I remember I called him on Christmas Day, having watched the James Cameron interview, which is amazing. If people haven't seen it on Michael's channel, Just Fooling, you should watch him talking to James Cameron. And Michael said, you almost make me emotional. The fact that we've come to a place now where you can call me up and tell me you saw that and appreciated it and wish me happy Christmas because we hadn't spoken for so long. And it's all down to Viking Samurai because I went on your show and, you know, I did. The thing is, I wouldn't have thought Michael Biehn necessarily was a Viking Samurai content consumer, right? Because you're very much into the world of 80s martial arts actions. I guess you go over into the still, he'd done Terminator. You probably like those action films, but
Oh yeah.
the perception is you're talking about Van Damme and Seagal and Frank Dukes and all this stuff. I wouldn't have thought Michael Biehn was sitting at home going, "Boy, I really want to know whether Frank Dukes really fought in the Kumite or not." But anyway, but it worked out great. That was indeed the last. And then since then, I had a busy time. I've actually published two new books. This one, 36 Chambers of Kung Fu Cinema.
Nice.
And I've been told I need to hold the cover up like I'm on the shopping channel. There you go. And then
And for
Bruce Lee and
people to
I.
buy these books, real easy.
www released, I'll send you the link.
Okay.
www released.com is the only place that you can buy them. And I'm happy to say that the reason this is actually the re-edited new version of Bruce Lee and I, because the last one completely sold out. And then
Nice.
the reason that we just do it through the website is the way the industry is at the moment. If you're a small press like we are, and you try to cooperate with the major platforms, and you try to deal with all the issues that have arisen out of all the tariffs and things, it just doesn't work as a business. So it's much better for somebody like me who has, who's like a big fish in a small pond to go out and say, "Listen, guys, I've done a book. Bruce Lee and I, and then the next one's going to be Jackie Chan and I, and you can get it here if you want it." And I either end up with a warehouse full of unsold books, or people do buy them and
You
then we
buy it
ship them and ship them and
and
I can
appreciate
sign
them and
them. And
love
it's
them.
more
Yeah.
of a cottage industry. But yeah, though years and years ago, my first book, Hong Kong Action Cinema, was with a publishing company called Titan. And I'm talking to them now about doing another book with them working with a more conventional publishing house. But I do want to do more books. It's very exciting to do Bruce Lee and I, and that kind of, be careful what you Well, if you want to make God laugh, you make plans. Because I was like, okay, I've been into Bruce Lee, like I'm in my mid 60s now, so I was like probably 12, 13 when I first got into Bruce Lee. And
Sure.
everything that I found out, everything I experienced is in these 700 pages. And I
Wow.
did a documentary for History Channel about the death of Bruce Lee, which was
Hmm.
kind of a downer. Because it was purely about that. It was just researching the
Yeah.
death of Bruce Lee. And then in the wake of that, I was like, well, maybe that's it for me and Bruce Lee. Maybe I don't, maybe
Oh,
I
it's
still
not over
revere and
yet.
appreciate him. And then and the thing is, there are more people like Arrow Video, which is a big DVD company, brought out this gorgeous 4K Blu-ray restoration, and I enjoyed that. There's this Lex Luthor lookalike called Alan Canvan who brought out this new documentary, Broken Rhythm. I'm looking forward to seeing that. My good friend Steve Kerridge, he sent me a 3 hour documentary, and he's got more stuff coming down. So I would just be a consumer
Sure.
of Bruce Lee content, and I'd done so many documentaries and so many things relevant to Bruce Lee. That would be it. And then I was talking to Bruce's brother Robert,
Mhm.
and we talked about um, how in 1971 a guy showed up in Pak Chong, Thailand, to make The Big Boss, and that was the Bruce Lee the world was going to embrace overnight. But he had been in Hollywood for 10 years without really breaking out as a
Sure.
movie leading man. And he had been in Hong Kong before, having the experiences he had as a child and as a youth. So why was he that specific individual with those component elements that made him a star? And given that I've been fascinated with Bruce Lee and been kind of on the forefront of people researching and evangelizing for Bruce Lee over the years, this I thought I'm interested. I've never really looked into this,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
yeah.
guess I don't want to say in too much detail because somebody else will do the documentary first. But it was interesting going upriver, particularly having Robert involved and Andrew Pong, my producing partner, who you met, because you get more of the Chinese perspective. Because there's this key, obviously, from when he was even though he was born in San Francisco, Bruce was raised in Hong Kong, and a lot of the influences on his life, and even things that he in later life in interviews would kind of dismiss out of hand, I think they had a very profound effect on him. And it's interesting. I don't know if you found this, David, but a lot of the times when I'm talking to people, the things that they don't really want to confront or the things that they dismiss as immaterial are actually at the heart, those traumas or those inspirations are at the heart of what they are.
Sure.
But almost the less willing they are, like if you said to me, "Oh, you never met your biological father," I would just dismiss it. Oh, he's an asshole.
Hmm.
But to some degree, the drive, the energy, the motivation for me to do the things I've done came from wanting to impress this invisible biological father who I've never met. So I kind of like try to examine the Bruce Lee persona from that view of like what really made him who he was. And sometimes who you are comes out without you willing it, particularly if you're a movie star. Because
Bay,
if you
real quick, I would say that makes you such a great writer in general, not just books, but screenplays, stories, everything else, is because you really understand human psychology and motivation. That's why people could connect with this stuff, you know?
Well, I hope so. And I mean, I've been alive a long time, and as a writer, I mean, um, really everything is about the story of a person. And it's interesting because I mean, maybe we can segue into, we'll come back and talk some more about the documentary later, but it's funny. Today I went to Michelle Yim's concert and met Philip Chan outside, the police inspector from Bloodsport, who
Oh
was
yeah,
also the
okay, yeah,
host
sure,
of
sure. That's
my
cool.
Death of Bruce Lee documentary. And we just chatted, and I said, "Oh, I'm doing something else about Bruce Lee." And he also said, "Oh, is there anything?" He's got this great voice. Is there anything else to be said? And I said, "Well, we think there is, yeah, and we'll catch up another day." But then, having just seen him, I sat down and said, "Gee, it's interesting, because I know you've spent a lot of time talking about Bloodsport,
Oh, yeah.
and peripherally, I know there's a lot of people talk about Enter the Dragon, but they remain the two kind of they are the martial art picks by which all others are judged. They
By far,
in
man,
a
they set the standard.
genre. I mean, definitely of English language ones, but of globe films that have been appreciated globally, they are the two. And I think what you were just saying about the 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 core of a writer as a filmmaker as an author being to somehow explore aspects of the human condition and the human spirit. It's the films in the martial art genre that have succeeded in doing that as well, that have stood the test of time. And if you look at Enter the Dragon, which has been this, which I think is greatly under kind of, I think it's appreciated as a vehicle for Bruce Lee to be charismatic and to fight.
Hmm.
I don't think it's been appreciated for quite how wonderfully constructed it is and how it has more ideas in it. How many times have you seen Enter the Dragon? I'm curious. Start to
Honestly,
finish.
probably not enough. Not nearly as much as Bloodsport.
Right. And I think
Bloodsport,
you, I
like I
think,
had it Bay
yeah.
every day playing on my VCR as I was stretching in front of the TV and wanting to be able to
I
move like Van Damme because I was taking Taekwondo at the time.
I suspect that there are people who've seen Bloodsport like you any dozens of times. And
Oh,
if you said, "What's the
hundreds,
second
yeah.
movie?" they would say Enter the Dragon. And there's people who've seen Enter the Dragon many, many times and said, "What's the second great English language American produced martial art movie?" It'd be Bloodsport. And I
100%.
and I think and then there's people like myself perhaps who have an equal appreciation of the two. But Enter the Dragon's interesting because in the movie, Bruce Lee's character is a lay monk from the Shaolin Temple who is sent on a mission. Like his motivation is he needs to redeem the honor of the Shaolin Temple because a former monk has gone renegade, which is this Mr. Han, played by Seth Geen. We later find out that not Seth Geen, but not Mr. Han, but his bodyguard O'Hara has killed or caused the death of Lee's sister. So there's a personal. And at the end of the film, the last line of the movie is Bruce comes in, "You have offended my family. You have offended a Shaolin temple." And my mum said, "What's he done to Shirley Temple?" No, no, mum. Shaolin. Shaolin Temple. Um, but it's interesting because the in a way, if you actually analyze it with like a cahiers de cinema view, it's actually about the corruption of a monk. Because at the beginning of the film, we find the Lee characters living in a Shaolin temple. And it's interesting because the place that they filmed the scene, don't concentrate on the finger, you miss all the heavenly glory. That place is in Hong Kong and it is San Temple. The story of it is really a parallel to Shaolin Temple. And they have a statue of Damme, the founder of Shaolin Temple, actually on that site. So it's a very interesting choice of location
Yeah.
because it is the closest we have in Hong Kong to a Shaolin Temple kind of space. But he's teaching this young kid. He's having sparring matches with Sammo Hung. He's publishing books. He's just living this kind of life,
Sure.
kind of life I lead, living on a remote island in Lantau and, kind of doing all those other things.
Sure.
And then he's just out of the blue. A guy shows up and says, "We want you to enter this tournament as our agent." And then the abbot says, "Hey, and by the way, you need to get vengeance because you have to avenge the honor of the temple." And then his old manservant says, "And by the way, I've never told you this, but one of Han's guys caused the death of your sister." So he then, in the course of the movie, starts killing people and breaking necks and breaking arms and doing a lot of stuff that Shaolin shouldn't do. And I think the greatest moment, a cinematic moment with a capital M in the genre, or at least in the Western version of the genre, is when towards the end of the film when he kills Bob Wall and he kind of jumps up, jumps down, crushes, kills Bob Wall, and then there's this expression on his face that's almost it works as a cinematic moment.
Yeah.
I mean, if you and I did it, I think the audience would fall off their chair laughing. Tried to
It'd
do
be
it. And
hard to
you'd
pull off,
see,
man. It would be
if you
hard to
saw the
pull off.
Bruce Lee lookalikes do it, like Dragon Lee with all those veins popping in his face. But when Bruce Lee does it, I've played that either as a clip or we played the film as a whole, and the audience goes silent. They just react to it. And he
Powerful, yeah.
floats back. And my read on that is that he feels from the peaceful Shaolin master he was at the beginning of the film, he's reached a point where he's committing sins, breaking his vows, um, and he has this reaction to it. And then at the end, he's weary and he disappears. And I wrote a novel called Daughters of Han, and in that we kind of find out what happened to him after Enter the
Oh,
Dragon, as per
okay.
my imagination. And then the secondary character is Roper, played by John Saxon,
Sure.
who starts the film as a kind of devil-may-care gambler, riverboat gambler. And he doesn't really care about anything, but it's about him becoming a man of integrity, of finding his lost honor. And there was actually a line cut from the film where at the end, Mr. Han wants Roper to fight Bruce, the Lee character. And Roper says, well, there are men a man must fight, and there are those he must stand beside. And that is a decision he's making to risk his own life for the cause of the good. Whereas everything we saw before with him, he was just a gambler and a hustler and didn't have a particularly strong moral code. So that was happening. And the third character, Mr. Han, who, rather than being just a one-note villain,
Man, you come right out of a comic book.
has this incredible speech when he takes Roper, played by John Saxon, into the weapons chamber, and he says, it's hard to associate these horrors with the proud civilizations that created them. Greece, Sparta, the knights of Europe, the samurai, they worship strength because it's strength that makes all other values possible. It's this very Nietzschean a philosophy, a kind of a justification for why he's living the way he is, and why he's made the choices that he has. And it wasn't surprising to me that the Michael Allen, who wrote the script for Enter the Dragon, was a protege of John Milius, who had directed Conan the Barbarian. Because
Mm.
I think, there's a parallel with the Riddle of Steel in that scene, and it's very Miliusian, that whole thing. So one of the reasons I think Enter the Dragon has resonated with people is, yes, it moves with a cracking pace. It's
Sure.
got the formula of Dr. No, the old James Bond movie and book, or Fu Manchu. Of course, it has Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee fighting less than in Fist of Fury or Way of the Dragon, but looking magnificent
Hmm.
and in a vehicle that foreign audiences could relate to. But I think it was what really works is the human factor. And you see in the wake of Enter the Dragon, nobody did a movie where you had to wait until The Matrix to have philosophy
Oh,
in the
sure.
film. And you had to, and none, I don't, I look at the other martial art films, even those made in Hong Kong, even those made in the West, I see them primarily as, our late friend Richard Norton. He said, like, a martial arts movie is 8 fights and the reason they happen. And I think that's true. And that has driven the martial arts movie industry over the years. But the ones that have really resonated with people are um the kind of the movies which actually take a human character on a journey. Then when you go to Bloodsport, the Frank Dukes character, as depicted in the film, and I'm not going to make any claims or counterclaims about the veracity of the story.
Oh, that's real.
I think so too.
This young man who, like you, like me, came into the world and after a certain amount of time goes, I'm actually in the wrong skin. I should be somebody else living another life,
Teach me. I can do it.
you know?
Yeah.
And then the question is, how far are you willing to go to fulfill that instinct? Because I think some people just sublimate it and never do anything. They just work in a bank and they go home at night and they watch kung fu movies or whatever, right? That's as
Sure,
far as they
sure.
go. Or you get somebody like me, someone like you become Viking samurai and you do movies and you do boxing matches and you have this thing. And I come to Hong Kong, learn Chinese and start making movies and learning kung fu, doing all the stuff that I did. In Bloodsport, Frank Dukes' character, we don't really see much of his real family because as soon as he meets Tanaka, that is his father.
Yeah.
I am your father. That is the surrogate father. And he wants to at least match the achievement of Tanaka's blood son, of his real son. And then when the son is killed, he takes that position. And the motivation throughout is, I want to make, I do it for you, Shidoshi. I want to make you proud. If you took that out and you just had a guy like Jackson, who's like, I want a few more scars on my face. I'm just going to enter this tournament. I want to make money. I want to date. I want to get the hot chick, and that's why I'm there. I don't think the film would have stood the test of time.
Very shallow then. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's that lovely moment. They're actually in the forests in Yunlong. It's the same place that Jackie Chan fought Yun Siu Tin in Drunken Master, when he gives him the sword, and the music is so beautiful, and the camera pulls back. And it's those quieter beats and the feeling of like, you know, he desperately needs to prove himself, and he can't step away, even if the army are after him, even if the Hong Kong police are after him, even if the girlfriend's begging him not to do it. He has to. Why is he doing it? For ego, for the money? No. He's sworn an oath to this new father. And I had the same thing in my own life. I adored my adoptive father, Morris, who I grew up with in England, who was an accountant and very square and a lovely, lovely man. He bought me my first copy of Enter the Dragon. And he would
Oh,
have bought me
wow.
Bloodsport if I'd asked him, but I didn't need, by
Sure.
that point, I didn't need him to. But then when I found my biological mother in Australia, I found that my stepfather was a Tanaka style karate master, Tino Ceberano, Richard
Mhm.
Norton's instructor.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I had that, and then pledged allegiance to my adoptive father, rest his soul, had passed away, and I kind of, in my mid-20s, became the son, the adoptive son of Tino, and treated him as a father. So I could really relate to the, I think my reconciling with the family was, I can't remember the time frame if I'd seen Bloodsport, but I certainly, over the time watching, related to the idea of, one, this white French guy who goes, I'm Japanese, I'm a ninja, I'm some kind of Asian warrior, number one. Number two, I've been adopted into this family, and I've got these amazing surrogate parents, which we all would like to have Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka as our parents, right?
Sure.
It's kind of like Bloodsport is kind of like Karate Kid with Mr. Miyagi, but if any of them in Karate Kid could really fight, right?
Yeah, the true.
Yeah. And then you had that, the driving thing, and that is what people react to. And I think the reason other tournament movies and other the films after that they came after, even films like, for example, The Quest, where it had some of the tropes of Bloodsport, and the Bloodsport sequels, that they didn't work. Why? Because they didn't get that. They didn't see why that was the soul and the heart of the film. They were just like, yeah, we just get good-looking European guys that can kick. Same thing with the Kickboxer sequels, same, but they moved away from, what are audiences viscerally reacting to? They're not. I mean, if they just want to watch people punch each other for spurious reasons, they can watch the wrestling, right?
Sure,
There's no,
sure.
don't need to watch them. And you can, but it's interesting because in the Hong Kong films, which of course is my métier, there's always been this extraordinary blend between remarkable storytelling and, incredible kinetic action. If you ask me as like a connoisseur of the genre, okay, 10 American-made English language martial art films that have human spiritual quest stories that you can relate to, and have cutting edge, martial arts action scenes that you can really appreciate, and have the score and the finish and the polish. Lately, there's probably been a few more, but if you go back to say that the genre came into being, I don't know, in America, I mean, in the wake of Enter the Dragon in 73, there's probably 20 years when there's really nothing really, kind of that hits all those points. And the only movie that did, I think, was Bloodsport. And then maybe years later, you could obviously make claims to The Matrix and maybe the John Wicks and some of these other movies that, really are class A studio projects where they spend a lot of time on the script. They have a lot of things going on. Yeah, theories about why these films, because I think it's interesting because I can see somebody looking at your channel and looking at your fascination with Bloodsport and going, why does he care so much? And or even these obsessives about Bruce Lee, why do they care so much? And what I think it's like a manifestation of Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. It is like there's a there's a very profound hero's journey kind of in the heart of these movies. And people are responding to that. And there's two ways to respond to art. One is a pure appreciation as an audience,
Mhm.
which is most art with most people most of the time, whether it's paintings or music or books or films. Then there is a transformative thing, which I think you've experienced,
Oh, sure.
and I've definitely experienced, when you saw a film or you saw a picture and you just changed in that moment.
It's powerful, man. Art is
What was the one for you?
mean, it was Bloodsport, and everything you said, you hit the nail on the head. Like, there's a reason why these things are still talked about decades later and remembered because there's a lot more depth. Like when you were explaining everything, what Enter the Dragon, of course, like it's deep. People think, oh, Bruce Lee looks cool and he's doing kung fu. It's like, well, yeah, that's cool, but that's not why we love the film. That's why we like the film,
Yeah.
but that's not why we love the film. And with Bloodsport, it's all about honor. Even when Van Damme, the Frank Dukes character was telling the reporter, like, this is not for the press. This is not for money. This is not for glory. This is for honor.
Yeah.
It's deeper. It's a different kind of motivation that is powerful and it really connects with people. So
I think so. And I think for me, it was like and I talk about it in my book, Bruce Lee and I, available now. But I mean, that I just saw a photograph of Bruce Lee and I can almost track a path of my life to that moment. And then looking at the picture and everything transforming and going, who's this guy? What is Kung Fu? Getting down the family atlas. Where is Hong Kong? And I've lived here 30 years now, so it ran deep, and I think in terms of experiencing reflections of the life of Bruce Lee in my own life, I've done more than other people. But then at the same time, to do things that were kind of uniquely my own. I mean, that was what Bruce was philosophizing about, wasn't it? Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and create what is specifically your own. And you can do that if you do guitar, if you're writing books, if you whatever it is that you're doing, you can apply that to it. But I definitely had that moment, and I think that there's a very profound atavistic reaction to something in stories and storytelling. Whether it was like now, because Christopher Nolan's doing the Odyssey, right? And
sure.
then that began with Homer, if Homer was a person, telling a story. Once upon a time, there was a man, Odysseus. What happened? And then it's the Space Odyssey, and then it's now the movie, whatever the film is that's being done now. Or even the cave paintings, that was somebody bothered to go through all the trouble of preparing the pigment and going, here's me and my friend hunting buffalo. And people reacted to that. And I think martial art films actually have an element of them, a modern mythology. It was so interesting because I met Jean-Claude recently in Hong Kong, just down the street from where I am now, because do you know about the fact that he's now producing art? He does
Oh,
drawings.
he like paints and stuff, right?
He does, and it's places the exhibition I saw, it was primarily places that he'd been, and he'd done
Okay.
like an impressionistic image of it, and then but and he was there for the exhibition, so I just went down the street and I brought one of my sons with me, who's very into bodybuilding or whatever, and he comes in,
Nice.
short Kyle, and it was interesting because these Calvin and cars, it was almost like Chad and Alex from Double Impact, but I just brought one of them. I think I brought Alex. And then so he came in and then he says, "Oh, take a photograph." Jean-Claude couldn't have been sweet. It couldn't have been nicer. So of course Kyle takes off his jacket and he's got like a tank top and all these muscles and what have you, and posing. And he said, "You're just an inspiration. Like I'll watch 5 minutes of Bloodsport or one of your other films before I go to the gym
Oh,
to
sure.
get me all ready to rumble." And I was so happy because I think you and I I'm obviously quite a bit older, but I definitely was inspired when I saw the physicality and everything, whatever Jean-Claude was doing, to kind of, in my own way, gee, I want to do some of that stuff or
Sure.
follow some of that path, right? And I see it now in my kid. And then I also gave him a copy of the book, which was wonderful. And I think a mutual friend of ours, actually, James Bennett, was in his place in Hong Kong, and it was on the side. He says, "Oh, Bey gave me this book." I was kidding with him. I said, "The next one will be John Claude and I,
I
Van
was gonna
Damme and I."
say that could be a future book right there, man.
Years ago, I did actually have, when I first came to Hong Kong, I had a contract to do a book, a series of books about Hong Kong action, about Hollywood action stars, which was Seagal and Schwarzenegger and Van Damme. And I think in the end, I just basically gave the money back and didn't do the books. And the reason was it just felt kind of counterintuitive. I just moved to Hong Kong
Mhm.
and I'd just done a book about Hong Kong. And my main aim at that time was to do films. At the time, I was shooting a movie called Circus Kids in China, where I was playing the bad guy. And it just felt like I don't see how I'm going to do justice to these books. But I remember having a conversation with John Claude about it because he was very worried about somebody doing an unauthorized biography of him. But I don't know. I got a lot of books I want to do. Even then, I think you should. I mean, I think there's people better suited who are in LA or in America or in Europe to do a book about those guys than I am. Whereas conversely, um, it's interesting. Somebody was uh, accused me of being critical of. I for different reasons stopped doing DVD Blu-ray commentaries, at least not in any great numbers.
Okay.
And obviously, in the wake of that, some people have done, many people have done them, and some of them were good, some of them were not good. And in general, I didn't ever, kind of criticize or comment on them. I didn't think it was appropriate. Somebody recently was saying, "Oh, and I criticized Frank Zhang," and that's completely not the case. I greatly admire Frank Zhang. He's like one of the preeminent commentarians now for Hong Kong films, and he's ethnically Chinese, speaks much better Cantonese than I do, better accent, does a good job. What I had said, and I think it's true, is it is impossible for anybody to, if you're an insider in the industry and you speak Chinese and you know all the actors and you know where all the films were shot and you have access to all that information, you live in Hong Kong for 30 years, you can't match that, however well informed you are and however diligent you are when
Sure.
you're living in San Francisco or somewhere. It was like be like me doing commentaries for Bollywood films without living in India. And there's another guy who's lived in India 30 years who's doing it. It's just a different perspective. So that was as much as I wasn't being critical. I was purely saying everybody has their own strength or weakness. When I'm for a white guy pretty good when I say the names of Chinese actors, when I talk about Chinese phrases. My accent is probably, if you're a Cantonese speaker, you go, well, you can tell he's a foreigner. When Frank says something, you don't. He
Mm,
sounds like a native. I don't know if he's from Hong Kong, but he sounds like a native Chinese person.
sure.
But at the same time, he may not know where somebody's shot, or someone was shot. He might not know who some actor is because he's not in Hong Kong. So that's what I was kind of, alluding to. And so to me, if somebody's doing a Van Damme book, probably they should be in the States. And if somebody's doing a book about Jackie Chan, like I'm working on now, you should be in, it kind of makes sense, right? Like if I
Yeah,
said
yeah,
to
it
you,
does
you're going to
definitely.
do a film about, Amitabh Bachchan, you probably it's not an essential, but I think it's better if you're in India because you'd have access. I mean, even Matt Polly, who did a wonderful biography of Bruce Lee alive, he spent
Mhm.
a considerable amount, he's working out of my office. He spent a bunch of time here. And again, if I had criticism of his book, it would just be there's probably a limitation to how much you can truly embrace the Chineseness of Bruce Lee's life and the influences on his life as an American. Just as I think if you were a non-English speaking Chinese person trying to understand American Westerns, there might be something of a barrier because culturally, linguistically, you wouldn't really be getting a very pure the pure essence of it. I mean, it's interesting. I'll give you an example, and this is something we're exploring in the documentary. Um, Bruce Lee's first teacher of martial arts, as far as I can ascertain, was his father,